So let me just start with numbers. Um, so just recently, about 2 weeks ago, a poll was conducted in France asking people, considering the event that occurred a year ago in Paris, and they're referring to the attacks on the satirical journal Charlie Hebdo, which one of the sentences best represents your opinion? And 76%, so of course this was a sample, right? But 76% said, je suis Charlie, I am Charlie. And 22% said, yeah, I'm not Charlie. And these numbers are roughly the same numbers that came out a week after the attacks. People were polled, and so there hasn't been a variation. However, I can tell you that 76% of French people do not read Charlie Hebdo. So what does it mean to feel Charlie? So what does it mean for our students? Do they need to know about this? Is this important? I say yes. Why? Because I truly believe that there are events that can affect how a generation perceive certain, not only perceive certain events, but perceive a way of seeing the world. And just like there was a before and after September 11, there is a before and after 2015 in France. And many media are now talking about the Génération Bataclan. Now, that doesn't necessarily relate to the attack on Charlie Hebdo, because the Bataclan was the concert hall that was attacked in Paris in November. But what it means for many is that this generation has now lived through 2 serious terrorist attacks, and it has they have lost their innocence, if you will, or they have had to really reconsider what it is to be French. And so why is it important? Because our students will eventually interact, we hope, form relationships, because why do you learn a language if it's to interact, to communicate? And I think it's important to understand why people make certain choices or why they think a certain way. And that there's a same event can be seen differently depending on where you are. And if they reach this critical awareness, they can begin to understand that culture is situated. And the gentleman over there, you ask a question, how can we make students understand, to Kristen, how can we make students understand that, learning a language is not just about learning the language, the linguistics, but also the culture? I think that's the key. It's to help them redefine what culture is. Because when students come to the classroom and think, well, culture is facts, it's numbers, it's whatever, and we don't do anything to change that understanding, then they will continue to approach the task with, I need accuracy, I need to get better at my pronunciation, and they won't necessarily look at the intercultural aspect of it. So how can we stimulate that critical awareness? I think we need to help them identify and investigate differences between their frames of reference and the target culture frames of reference, but also help them consider their own frames of reference. So by looking at differences, then they can reflect on what they believe, they feel. And this way we help them make connections. So we don't make the connections for them. We let them go through this process in order to develop their sensitivity to what other ways of seeing the world. And this is put them on the path, we hope, to become respectful and responsible language users, which is what the Global Competence Statement of ACTFL has set out as one of the goals, is that just acquiring communicative skills or communication skills is not enough. But we want to create responsible language users. The thing is, in the foreign language classroom teaching materials, and this has been said already, but it tends to focus, textbooks focus on structures and communication. When they do provide culture, I'm not saying, most textbooks have culture, but it's rather an observer viewpoint. It's the numbers, it's the people, it's picture, oh, here's a meal, but it doesn't necessarily provide the insider point of view, the perspective on it, the opinions, the feelings toward it. So it's sort of a touristic experience. It could be a brochure. What Claire Crum said, they provide a way to serve diversity, but not to engage with the difference. And for teachers, well, sometimes they feel unsure or ill-equipped to deal with culture, that dynamic sort of elusive thing that culture is. And I really like this definition by Nieto, because it talks about the ever-changing values, traditions, worldview that are shared and transformed by the people. And for me, it's very important, the unsure of feeling ill-equipped, because I'm a language program director, and I get TAs that I want to do it, but I'm sticking with the book, because at least the book is I'm scared, and so this presentation that I'm going to pretty much introduce activities that I developed to help them teach with the issue with the terrorist attacks. And it's a work in progress. It's constantly evolving. It was piloted last fall. In the spring, it's going to be a slightly different, and then next fall it will be also, because we're kind of building it with the students. We're asking their opinions. So I'll just show you what was done last fall and what we're now going to do in the spring. And this is for third semester, intermediate. So first I'll situate the activity by talking about how to help creating awareness. And I'm going to argue that we should use mental constructs, and specifically freedom. And I typed freedom because of the events, but I believe it's applicable to any mental construct. And then I'll define the pedagogical approach, and I'll define geosemiotics, and I'll explain why I use geosemiotics. And then I'll talk about just the learning objectives, because that was a teaching task, and then the activities. So how can we help learners gain awareness? Well, first we need to help them confront multiple points of view. So give opportunities for that, and to explore the underlying frames of reference behind those points of view. And it can be anything historical, social, political, whatever strikes your fancy, to help them engage with otherness, with that difference. And in this way, they'll develop an appreciation for cultural difference, and also the capacity to understand choices during interaction. Why is this person making this reference right now? And how do I understand it, or do I not understand it? Because knowledge can be forgotten, the numbers or the names of the people that were victim, for example, in the attack. But awareness of how people reacted and felt is irreversible. Once you have that knowledge, you always have it. So, as part of the learning experience, we should create a space to investigate and construct these perspectives and reactions to events, provide opportunities to experience directly major events. And you're going to say, well, how can they experience directly past? Well, technology is here to help. And I'm going to show you how. And then make connections to express their opinions. So provide opportunities for reflections and introspections. And in that process, they gain a better understanding of themselves and thus the world around them. So mental construct, why? Well, because we all know what they are. They're not always displayed, but we all share them. We all understand them when we're from the same culture. They may differ across culture, and in that sense, they reflect a culturally situated vision of the world. And so we can use them to expose learners to multiple perspectives. So let me show you with freedom. We all know what freedom is. It exists across all cultures. But how the idea of freedom is mentally framed and physically represented is different. Let me introduce Lady Liberty, leading the people, and the Statue of Liberty. They're different. I mean, one is more clothes than the other. and one is a tad less violent, right? So now I'm going to talk about a little bit just where I'm coming from with how I set up the activities. So I decided to use a social constructivist approach to learning because I don't believe we should just give the students, like everybody else here, but they should participate actively in their own learning. They should do research, they should reflect, and they should discover their own answers through observation, investigation, and that allow them also to interact among themselves. And with this co-construction of knowledge, they can express their point of view, which I think is essential. I mean, you learn a language to be able to communicate and share, and your point of view is an important thing. And so they can also develop new insights, which makes it very collaborative and student-centered, which makes my dean very happy. I don't know about your dean, but my dean, that makes him happy. So let's talk about geosemiotics. So why geosemiotics? Well, I didn't really know much about geosemiotics, but as I was trying to figure out how we could help our students understand the reaction to the attacks, I thought, well, this would be interesting to use. So how can we use it? So geosemiotics is how language and science make meaning in relation to where and when they are physically appearing. So that's very situated. And so it allows to engage with cross-cultural awareness in that moment in time, so to expose to multiple practices, multiple perspectives. But it's also very practical because it helps turn learners into researcher and then turn them also into discourse analysts. And I'm going to show you how. So the learning objective was to recognize that value in frames of reference are culture-bound. I think that's essential. Demonstrate awareness of multiple perspectives. Identify some historical, social, and political cultural references tied to the concept of freedom. Contrast perspectives in French and native cultures, and then construct their own viewpoints and interpretations. So I had pre-activities where they could recognize and identify and explore cultural references, and then the main activity, and I used Pinterest to research and analyze, and then an expansion. And you can use Prezi, Animoto, these are just example, whatever. So let's talk about freedom. So first, ask students to, and all of this is done in French, obviously I translated here since I'm presenting in English, but to list an object, a monument, in person, an adjective, anything, freedom for an American. And then, you compare, and what are the most cited elements? So usually it's going to be the Statue of Liberty, the flag, So then I said, well, let me take you in the metro. And they're like, what? Why? And I said, well, let me explain. So Jeannot Lapin is a photographer, and for 10 years, he traveled the subway in Paris, the metro, and he staged literal interpretations of the station names. And his interpretation was based on the interrelation between the text and the image he was created. And so his interpretation was essentially socially, historically, and culturally situated. So this is Liberté, the station. So that gets students really talking. Why is he naked? What's with the luggage? So then, I said, okay, well, now let's think about that. Is nakedness really the incarnation of liberty? So I asked them to reflect on the concept by looking at these images. So we have Liberté guiding the people. We have Marianne. And then here we have references on these plaques that are for trees. So the October 28, 1989, the bicentennial of the revolution, this tree was planted as a symbol of liberty. So then they are able to make this connection between these symbols. Then I said, well, what's République? Right? What image, monument comes to mind? So like, oh, president, I'm not sure. So, well, let's look at what Jeannot Lapin says. It's Marianne. And again, they'll be, why is she naked? said, well, it was the revolution, like it was free spirit. So I asked them, go ahead and pin symbols of Republic. And Pinterest is wonderful because you put it into your little browser and then you go Google and ta-da-da. So here are some samples. So there's the coq, Allons enfants de la patrie, that's the national anthem. And so then I asked them, okay, well, let's consider these images that you posted and then images I'm going to show you in a second. And what are the symbols you can identify across all these pictures? How is freedom represented and characterized? How does liberty relate to republic? And how does your conception of freedom compare to the French point of view? So that's to engage their reflections. So here are some images. So we see Vive la musique. It's the same image. She's closed now because we're in 2015, you know, so we don't show dress now. But it's the same idea. It's the exact same composition if you look at it, except she's holding a clarinet, not a bayonet. And then the next two images are actually taken during the Marche Républicaine of January 11, 2015. Again, we have Marianne, who's a central figure. We have the flag. And what is crazy about these images is the composition. They are so similar. And the crayon, the liberté, so the students really get talking, especially if you ask them to, to think about the composition and how it works. So then I said, okay, let's go inside the Marche Républicaine. So I asked them to search photos of the demonstration. Select photo, it can't be Je suis Charlie, because, there was thousands of those. We don't want that. But we want to see what, signage, the demonstrator, what they were expressing. So they pinned 3 photos, and then, you can write a little sentence or two to explain why they chose this specific photo. So if you have 20 students, you get a lot of data, which is wonderful because you don't have to do anything. They all do it for you. And what's great also is that it's always different. It was run into 2 classes and it was completely different because the students, so it's what interests them, what they want to know. So you can really focus on that. So here are a few samples. So at the top, they will take my right to laugh. And then they stole my religion. And then there's no veil, no cross, no kippa, no underwear, no culotte, sans culotte, right? The revolution, laïcité, the play on Cher Liberté. This was, it's taken from the Marseillaise, except it's that, oh God, I didn't even think about it. Well, it's crayons instead of trenches. But with Marianne. And then the last one is Charlie, I think therefore I am. And so what are we going to make the student do with these pictures? Well, this is when they become discourse analysts. So I asked them to identify common elements. They work in groups, 2, 3. So search for words, images, symbols, start making lists, create categories for what's recurring, and start deriving patterns and create themes based on ideas. And then we compare with classmates. And it's quite amazing what they come up with, and they're like, wow, I feel so important. So, okay, yeah, we're doing research. And so then we start going into a little more of freedom of speech, not just freedom in general, but in speech. So in French, it's the right to say, write, or print what you want. And it's rooted in the Declaration of Rights that came with the French Revolution. But that freedom of speech ends at defaming, slandering, or inciting hate based on race, religion, or sex. So for many, Charlie Hebdo embodies freedom of speech. How? So based on their research, they can now answer that questions. And then I ask them, can you really laugh at everything? And Le Papa Rio, the Pope in Rio de Janeiro, that one gets them like, oh, do you know? I thought, it's not less shocking, but can you really? So that gets them going. So then we asked them, well, if you were at the Marche Républicaine, what would your sign say? So we didn't do that. The students said in their comments about the activity, oh, I wish I could have made my own sign. So that's what I'm saying, let's do this. So this semester they're going to do it, so we'll see what happens. And then, of course, there's still 22% of the population that doesn't feel Charlie, so why? I grabbed, I'm not just Charlie, I am not Charlie, I am a Muslim, not a terrorist. And then this one was, I am Charlie, I am Jewish, I am Muslim, I am French. And I'm not going to play it, but there's a little clip, and on my handout there's the link to it. It's from the France 2 journal, and it's on the January 12th. All the schools had to observe a minute of silence, 2015. And in about 60 schools, they refused to. Students refused to be silent. And so they interviewed some teachers. One of the things was, based on the news report, how did they justify their reaction? And pretty much it's their fault. It's the journalist's fault. And in a way, they committed suicide. They should have stopped publishing images of Mahomet. And then also the teachers state that children have the impression that 50% of the French population is against everything. That embodies Muslims. So how do they form that impression? And in the news report, it says it's social media, it's brothers and sisters. And is that a reality? And again, you can send them, do some research. It's up to how much time you have. But then you can ask them what is their reaction. And it's fine, whatever reaction they have, it's expressing their feelings toward this issue, just like the French have to come to term with, your students should have the right to come to term with. So how do we get them to reflect and connect? Digital story or digital presentation, in which they can contrast French and American points of view on freedom and embodiments of freedom. What was that? What is l'esprit Charlie? And what are your feelings or your character's feelings toward freedom of speech? Because we let them choose a character. And a lot of them actually had a dialogue between Lady Liberty and Marianne. But others chose to be a participant or even a child. There was a child and his father. I don't know if, I think the idea came from this, after the November attack, this, I don't know if you've seen this video, this little boy and his father are talking. And so some students did that. But Animoto would work also, or maybe also I was thinking creating maybe a bande dessinée. 1 second, I'll just finish. Because it is about satirical and cartoonist, so why not? And there are software that's free out there that they can do that. And then for the assessment, I assess with content, with creativity, visual support, and they could use most of the images that they had, pinned. Audio recording, word choices, language control, and spelling. Audio recording if you want them to record. You don't have to include it, but these are all the possible categories. Questions? Yes. Thank you.